Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. Hope you're doing well. Okay, let's do a recap of week 16 of the marathon train so far. Week 16 took place from the 28th of August to the 3rd of September, and it's also the first week of the 3-week race taper train block. Monday was just a bit of rest, a bit of walking, did some strength work. Yeah, took it easy, I guess. Tuesday was an 11k recovery run with some speed work at the end. It was like 8 by 100 meter strides. I did it down at Saltpan Creek and Riverwood, and yeah, it was raining a bit the night before, so the boardwalks and trails were a bit wet and slippery, but yeah, wasn't too bad, I guess. Took it a bit easy on the strides just to be safe, and yeah, overall the run went pretty well. Wednesday was a 19k medium long run. I decided to do it at the Cooks River Cycleway. Felt pretty solid throughout, and I guess the last few k's are pretty fast too for some reason. I think I just felt good, I guess. Thursday was 8k recovery with some speed work at the end. It was like 6 by 100 meter strides. It was raining a fair bit the night before, so I decided not to do it on grass. I just did it like around Riz Park instead. Felt like taking a bit easier than usual for a recovery run, and also went a bit slow on the strides just to be safe. Friday was an 8k recovery. Decided to do it on grass at Bankstown City Sports Complex. Was meant to take it pretty easy, but somehow it became a progressive run. I don't know why. Fortunately, it was still at recovery pace, and yeah, felt pretty solid throughout. And then Saturday was the final tune-up race for this whole marathon train program. It was supposed to be anywhere between 8 to 15 kilometers, and yeah, I guess I chose 10 kilometers again. This time it was the Sydney Striders 10k series at Parramatta, specifically Parramatta Park. The race starts at around 7 AM and takes about an hour to get there, so the plan was to sleep pretty early, wake up pretty early, and get there like around 6:30. It's just enough time to like warm up and like do my drills and strides and that kind of stuff. For some reason I had pretty poor sleep the night before. I'm not really sure why. It didn't go too well, but yeah, woke up like around 4:40 AM to get ready and stuff. Had a pretty decent breakfast. It was like overnight oats with some dates and some bananas, a bagel, and also some leftover raisin toast as well. It sounds like a bit much for like just a 10k race, but I don't want to risk getting hungry doing the race as well. And I knew I was able to digest all of it before the race, I guess. I left the house at around 5:30, got the train on time, and then once I got to Parramatta Station, I kind of just walked and slow jogged to Parramatta Park itself. Got my bib and also did some dynamic movements and drills as part of warm up. The weather has been getting warmer lately, but like for some reason that morning it was really cold. Even though it was kind of cold that morning, it was still pretty decent conditions to racing, I reckon. I also brought my new Saucony Endorphin Pro 3s. I got it some time ago and decided to wear it for this race for the first time ever. And then I decided to do the warm-up jog as well. It was a bit risky to wear my Rebel V3s rather than the Saucony Endorphin Pro 3s for warming up, I guess. So as part of warm-up, I did like a lap around Parramatta Park. So that's like around 3.2 kilometers. By the time I got back, I realized I was running pretty late. It was around 5 minutes before the race begins, and I haven't really like swapped out my shoes yet. So I kind of had to like rush and put my shoes on. Like I barely managed to get the shoelaces tied, and the laces are kind of short and my hands are like kind of cold still. Yeah, but somehow the lockdown was pretty decent. And then I had to run a bit fast to the actual start line, I guess. I got there with like around 30 seconds to go before the actual race starts. They were still waiting for some latecomers to go before it actually started, like around 7:01. Anyways, the start horn goes off and I tried sticking to the lead pack of like around 8 to 10 people. My goal time for this 10k race was like around 35 minutes 30. I feel like I'm anywhere between like 35 to 35:30 shape, but that's if it's like a flat or fast 10k course. But since Parramatta Park does have like a massive hill, I was gonna aim for like 36 minutes if I was wearing my Endorphin Speed 3s. But since I brought a carbon plated racing shoe, I figured that my band swings out, and yeah, might as well aim for like 35 minutes 30. At this point, I had no idea what the lead pack were going for. I figured I might as well hang on to them if they were like going like around 35 to 36 minutes pace. It was a pretty conservative start. I think these guys were quite experienced and knew how to pace themselves well, which is good. The first lap went pretty well. The lead pack was mostly sticking together, and I was kind of like 2 to 3 minutes behind them for the most part. And by the time I reached the big hill for the second time, it became like 6 people, but more like 3 and 3, I guess. And then once the third lap came around, I think we all started stringing apart a fair bit. The lead 3 guys were still like mostly sticking together for the most part, like a meter or 2 apart from each other. Me and 2 other guys like kind of apart now, and then after that big hill, I didn't really have anyone to tag along, I guess. So I just tried to hold my own pace. At this point, I'm not really sure if I was on target for my time goal. I didn't really like checking my watch that often during running in general. I just know that my watch has been notifying me like every kilometer or so, and it's been ranging from between like 3 minutes 45 to like 3 minutes 25 with like 2 to 3 kilometers to go. I figured I might as well just do my best to hold my pace, whatever it was at the time. It wasn't super fast or uncomfortable by any means. I was running solo for a while, so yeah, I don't want to risk like going fast and then blowing up or something. And then in the last mile or so, the 6th guy who was behind me, I think his name is Stuart, he finally catches up to me after I overtook him on the big hill earlier. He's like an older, taller guy with like strong, long strides. He seems to be chilling, and he was encouraging me to push on, but I don't think I was willing to like go much faster. So yeah, I just kind of held my pace and said, yeah, I'll try like tag on if I can. I think by the end of it, he finished like around 7 seconds in front of me. So well done to him. I'm pretty sure he had way more in the tank as well. So I finished in 6th place in around like 35:25 according to my watch, but like 35:23 officially. It's a massive PB. It's like about a minute faster than my previous 10k PB, which is from like 4 weeks ago in a similar event. It was the Sydney Striders 10k event for Homebush in Wentworth Common. I think this Parramatta course is a bit tougher than the Wentworth Common course in terms of the massive hill, although it's meant to be easier to visualize and deal with since it's like all wide and open. You're doing like 3 laps, I guess. But the Wentworth Common course has its own set of like smaller hills as well, and also like a few hairpin turns to deal with. Even though I feel faster at Parramatta, I think I'd have very similar race times in both courses anyway. I think the lead guys finished like around 34-40. They all seem experienced, and I think they all knew how to pace themselves well. I don't think they were running as like a fast or like a PB race like I was, but I think I would have finished around there unless I like really went all out or something, or added a kick of some sort, which I'm not too confident about just yet. I don't think I have enough experience in 10k races to pace myself that well or add like a crazy kick at the end. I'm mostly just there to like race my own race rather than compete in any way, but I'm pretty glad there was like some fast guys I could tag along behind for the most part in the race. Another thing is that these Sydney Striders events like always amaze me. Like there's always a lot of like older runners here, and some of them are really fast too. I'm talking about like 40s to like late 50s kind of runners. There's only a few young guys like myself in these races, and we're trying to barely hang on to these older runners, I guess. Anyways, in terms of the shoes, like the Pro 3s, they felt quite solid. It's a bit lighter, firmer, more stable and more responsive than my Speed 3s. A bit more snug in terms of fit, way more forgiving fit than the Vaporfly 2s. I had no issues with hot spots or like discomforts in general. The laces were a bit short. I think it's just for that model. It still held together pretty well for the whole race. Again, it's a bit risky to have only worn the Pro 3s for the first time ever in this race, but it turned out okay, I guess. I'm still not sure how it will perform for the actual marathon. I haven't run at marathon pace in those shoes yet, which is of course slower than my 10k race pace. It will also likely be hotter on the actual marathon race day, and I'll be running for like around 3 hours, so my feet will expand. Just based on the initial feel from this race, the shoes do feel okay, but fingers crossed I don't get like hot spots or blisters for the actual marathon, I guess. Overall, pretty solid race. Definitely a confidence booster in terms of my fitness levels, and also like a great debut for my marathon racing shoes, I guess. Finally, Sunday was a 27k long run. It was the usual long run course, starts at like Marrickville, goes all the way to Sydenham Park via the Cooks River Cycleway and cutting through Homebush. I didn't go to Parramatta this time. I just felt like sticking around in Sydenham Park. I also didn't get to stretch or foam roll the evening before, so I kind of started off a bit slow, but somehow felt pretty solid throughout, even with the 10k race the day before. That brings the total mileage to around 9 kilometers. A pretty solid week overall. Okay, so since I'm currently in the taper block for the marathon training, let's quickly talk about what tapering is, what it involves, and so on. A lot of it's going to come from an advanced marathoning book. Definitely give it a read sometime if you're interested in the details. I'm just going to summarize bits and pieces from it and also add my own opinions to it too. Yeah, so by now we've gone through like around 16 weeks of training, starting at the endurance block to slowly build up the base, and then the endurance / lactate threshold train block to add in some high level aerobic work while still continuing to build endurance, and then the race preparation train block to build some speed and get you used to racing, and now finally we're at the taper block. So all this weeks of structured training so far has provided a fair bit of improvements in long-term fitness needed to do well in the marathon. At the same time, all this consistent training leaves you a bit tired most of the time. It's not necessarily a bad thing, it's just part of ongoing training. There has been a few recovery weeks throughout to slightly reduce the accumulated fatigue, but not by that much. So as the marathon race day approaches, we need to cut back on our training so that we're a bit more rested and fresh for the actual race. But it's not just about cutting back training. The idea is we want to reach the start line at peak fitness and also as much energy as we need for the race. So finding a balance between the two can be a bit of a challenge. It means we still need to continue training to get into the best racing shape, but also rest enough to significantly reduce the fatigue of training, and that's pretty much what tapering is. So what are the key principles of marathon tapering? So for this training program specifically, the taper starts 3 weeks before the marathon. I think the general consensus is 2 weeks minimum. Tapering too short, like 1 week or something, will leave you too tight for the race day, and then tapering for too long, like 4 weeks, will lead to like a loss of fitness. So 3 weeks is a choice for this program. And then the idea is to still maintain training intensity, but to reduce mileage in general. Recovery days may become slightly easier, and if needed, you may take more days off. Recovery is also prioritized, and this includes like proper diet, hydration, sleep, and so on. And there's a bit more focus on like reducing muscle tightness with stretching, physical therapy if needed, massage, and rest. Okay, so how do we reduce training as part of the taper? Again, the idea is to maintain intensity of training while also reducing mileage. This is because when you reduce your running mileage, you reduce the accumulated fatigue too, giving you more energy for the actual race. And then you maintain intensity by adding efforts that you've been doing throughout training. And this includes like intervals and strides in order to maintain the adaptations you've gained doing training so far. However, with those kind of workouts like intervals, we still maintain intensity, but we pretty much reduce the number of reps. There's also a tune-up race 2 weeks before the marathon as a key session for gauging fitness levels and hopefully provide some psychological reinforcement that you're almost ready to do the actual marathon race. And in terms of overall mileage, in the context of this training program specifically, it will depend on the peak mileage. So for me, that's around 113 kilometers, and I'll be reducing the overall mileage as follows. So with 3 weeks to go, the mileage is reduced by around 20 to 30%. That means it's anywhere from like between 79 to 90 kilometers. Like this week, it's like around 90 kilometers. And then with 2 weeks to go, the mileage is reduced by up to like 40%. So like that'll be like around 68 kilometers at most. And then in the final week, which is the week of the marathon race itself, the mileage is reduced by like up to 60%. So that means like around 45 kilometers of mileage for the last week. Keep in mind that we're not actually progressively or like steadily decreasing our training efforts during the taper, because there's a risk of a small loss in fitness, and it doesn't do us any favors psychologically in terms of confidence and fitness levels. So to reiterate, we're still maintaining intensity by doing its efforts like intervals and strides, but within an overall trend of like recovery. And that will leave you fit, rested, and confident for the marathon. Also, sometimes the taper needs to be adjusted to suit individual needs. For example, some people prefer to take like a day off, like 2 to 3 days before the marathon. Others don't, and that's completely fine. Some take the day off before the marathon, but it's usually recommended to get like a light jog in, as it can allow you to check up on like tight muscles and maybe reduce a bit of anxiety too. During taper, sometimes we're tempted to like increase other non-running training as part of like cutting back running mileage, like cross training such as like biking and swimming. However, we have to try to resist that urge. We have to realize that the work is pretty much done, and now the goal is to maintain the gains that we've made while allowing your body to rest up for race day. Resistance training should be kept to a minimum in the last 10 days before the marathon, and pretty much out of the picture within the last few days. Some light core work and cross training is probably okay up until the last few days as well. Some flexibility and mobility work, foam rolling, and massage should be okay all the way up to the race day, as long as it's not more than what you're used to and not adding anything new to the routine, I guess. As race day approaches, it's quite normal to feel anxious. When the marathon is like 10 weeks away, it doesn't feel that bad, but when it's like a few days away, suddenly it becomes like way more real. And sometimes we just worry that all the training will go down the drain once taper comes, but that's not really true. Visualization can be really helpful to keep your mind at ease and mentally prepare a bit more and create a more positive mindset as part of the taper process. Try mentally running through the race. Visualize what you wear for the day, like the gear, the shoes. If you know the course well enough, you can try imagining yourself running through it. What happens if you get boxed in early on or like miss a water station? Try seeing yourself overcome those situations and problems, and even try visualizing running relaxed for the early stages of the marathon and then running stronger over the final 10k. But yeah, that's pretty much what tapering for the marathon is. We should believe in the hard work that we've done in training so far and treat the taper as like an important component of training to put us in the best state that we can be to further enable that for the actual race. Again, the idea is to maintain intensity while reducing running mileage on an overall trend of recovery all the way to the race. We won't know exactly how the race will go until we actually do it, but proper taper is still pretty important in getting you to the best shape you can be for the race. Anyways, hopefully this has been helpful for you guys in some kind of way. Feel free to share some of your advice or experiences when it comes to tapering. And for those of you who are training for the 2023 Sydney Marathon or any upcoming marathon in general, hopefully taper goes well. Other than that, that's pretty much all to say for now. Thanks for watching and have a nice day. Bye.